Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Lincoln Lawyer. A great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I think I've talked about this before, but if you aren't aware, I've never actually seen the movie that was adapted, because these are actually originally, I think, multiple novels, which I didn't know were written by Michael Connelly, who wrote the books that the Bosch books that the TV shows that I had it adapted from. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, especially because like Bosch Legacy, well, it's about this season's about to end, but still, like, just all that happening at once is pretty dope. That's cool. But regardless, I didn't know that Mickey's whole thing is like, which I'm wondering, did they change the character's name? Probably not. They probably kept it the same, probably in both when it was adapted into a movie and this. Whatever the case may be. Sometimes stuff like that gets changed from a book for whatever reason. But I did not know the reason why he's called the Lincoln Lawyer was because he drove around in a Lincoln. I thought the whole thing was like because he was a lawyer in Lincoln or something like that, you know? So that's what I thought that's what that was going to be, but I didn't realize, like, oh, you drive around in a Lincoln car and that. So like I said, I saw bits and I've seen previews of the movie, but I've never seen the movie. So this, like I said, or read the book. So this is my first time really getting to know this story. So it's an interesting introduction to Mickey, learning that he was in a surfing accident. He ended up having a whole bunch of surgeries, and because his work situation has been dried up for the past year because he got addicted to painkillers, because he ended up going through multiple surgeries. So he kind of went through, I think, a little bit of a downward spiral, and now it seems like this whole series, this particular case that he ends up getting, ends up being his way to kind of work his way up. I think that's kind of interesting, kind of a redemption story to some extent. It's interesting learning, like, oh, cool, his relationship with both his ex-wives and how he has them saved in his phone like that, which is like, are they aware that you have them saved as first wife, second wife? I'm sure they won't appreciate that one, you know. But I wonder, is that just because, like, is that his way to keep things straight in his head? Because, I don't know, it just seems super jacked up to do that, in my opinion. But still, he works with his second wife at his law firm, but and it seems like Maggie, they didn't really go into it too much, but it seems like Maggie, who his first wife, played by Neve Campbell, which I was like, oh, when I saw her in her trailer, I was like, holy crap. It seems like she might be in that same field too, because he talks a little bit about it with his daughter, was it Haley, later on, about the reason why she's really good at what she does is because she believes in the system. It seems like she's a prosecutor, that she puts away bad people. He defends people, you know, so I think that's interesting. But is it because he's kind of, it's not so black and white when it comes to guiltiness. It's so, like, everything's so muddied for him because people will lie and trick and manipulate. Like, you can't just rely on the truth because everyone's, like, trying to, like, game the system to some extent. Like, they swerve this and that. It's just, it gets a little, like, when you have to, obviously, like, he can use some, not necessarily dirty tactics. It's just like, no, this is actually what this is. But I think he's someone that tries to keep everything a little above board. And so he doesn't like the fact is that people will lie and manipulate stuff just to kind of, it doesn't sit well with him. So I think he kind of presents himself as someone with some integrity. So I think that probably hit even harder when he ended up having his, you know, addiction, which I think is interesting because later on he uses the words, certain parts he recognizes that, hey, like, you're an addict for life. But later on when he's talking to Trevor later on, played by Christopher Gorham. I've always said his last name wrong. I guess in my head I always autocorrect it to, like, Graham, but it's Groham. Or Gorham. I keep doing that. There was a show he did years ago that I was familiar with. It's from, like, the early to mid-2000s, I think. I don't remember, like, it was something like, what was it, like Jake 2.0 or something like that? He was, like, enhanced. It was almost like Chuck before Chuck, but it was like cybernetics almost inside of him. I don't remember what, or like his brain worked a certain way. I've never seen a lot of the show. I saw bits and pieces, but Covert Affairs, I know, is kind of one of the main shows I know him from too. But I've seen him in an assortment of things. But when he talked to Trevor about it before, he's like, oh, I'm not an addict anymore. So I guess that was more so to get Trevor on his side and be like, oh, take him on as a client. But it's like, yeah, you never stop being an addict. You're an addict for the rest of your life. you find a way to live with it and manage it, but you don't get it's never going away. It's always going to be something you struggle with. So I think that's interesting, because when he's talking to Izzy later on, because Izzy's like, oh, I don't recognize that person, he talked about the conversation of, oh, I don't think that person ever leaves you. So that's where I was like, I just thought that was kind of interesting how he presented that to two different people. Because he does talk about the fact is that he did go to rehab, he is sober, he is clean, but that's always going to be a guillotine hanging above his head that he's always that's going to come up. Probably be a pretty prevalent element in this story that he probably hits the stresses of this job meeting drug, which is why Maggie is not too keen on him doing all this, because she wants him to get back on his feet first before going into what is going to be a stressful job, because there's a lot with this job, because I hadn't even gotten into it, but the fact is that he got this job. That opening sequence was crazy, because I love how they kind of like subvert your expectations, because Home Dude, God, I'm blanking on, because Vincent's the lawyer's last name. I'm blanking on what his first name is. Jerry. Jerry was looking through he was like, okay, someone in my car, and he looks behind him and no one's there. It's like, oh, and then a person comes from the side, pop, pop. You're like, oh, subverting expectations, because you always expect the person to actually be in the back seat or something like that. So, but interestingly enough, Jerry, apparently 10 days before the beginning of all of this, ended up setting it up so that Mickey will inherit his entire business, which includes all his clients, which even Mickey's like, wait, what? The fact is he blindsides you with that. Obviously, the conversation comes up later. Did he know something was going to happen? Because it's not like he did this forever ago. He did it 10 days ago, but he never talked to you about it. Mickey said that they were cordial because they were friendly enough. They were colleagues. They crossed paths before, because he used to be a prosecutor. So they had been on opposite sides of each other, and Mickey has crushed him in court and stuff. But so I think that's going to be something. I think that's going to be an interesting element as we continue over the course of this season, because the main overarching case seems like it's going to be Trevor's case. It's going to be the main overarching case, but I guess as the season progresses, he'll also be balancing other cases, other of Jerry's cases, like he does with the Izzy thing. I thought that was kind of interesting. A lot once again getting thrown at him, because Trevor wants to go to trial next week, because he's had to wait so long for his time in court, because he wants to prove his innocence and clear his name, because he's had so many people run his name into the mud of he's this, he's that, he's a murderer, so he hasn't been able to defend himself to clear his name. So there's that. Izzy, he was only able to get a day break before Izzy, before he had to decide whether or not he's going to take Izzy's case, because he also has to talk to every one of Jerry's current clients to see whether or not they want Mickey to continue to fill in for Jerry, or do they want different representation as a whole. So stuff like that's really interesting, and all of this is kind of getting thrown at him all at once. So the fact is that the Izzy case I thought was really interesting. First and foremost, the fact is that how he handled that. It's like, well, you don't even have to go to the stand, because the stand was about her going on stand and talking about the good person that she is. Because yes, she stole this necklace, but she was also a different person then, because she was on drugs. She was an oxy and heroin person, heroin when she couldn't get oxy, and so I think that's why Mickey, connected with her initially, like, right, I know those struggles. So he definitely felt in tune to help her. And so she talked about that, once again, that not being who she was anymore. It was almost like a completely different person. So, but I love how Mickey handled it, where it turns out, right, she was getting, what was it, grand theft larceny or whatever, it has to be above a certain thing. He's like, I don't even think that necklace is worth as much as they claim it. It's supposed to be anything above $950 or something, but the necklace he says is barely worth $400. I have a jeweler here who will account to that. So I think we're also going to find out that it's going to be one of those shows where the person, he's one of those people that has a whole bunch of connections. He's made a name for himself, and he probably has a lot of people that are kind of part of his circle that he goes to for help of oh yeah, people who are certain in certain fields and stuff. He's made a lot of connections probably over the years that are ultimately going to help, probably not only in the Trevor case, but most likely the other cases he probably deals with over the course of the season. I should also note this is a David E. Kelly show too, which I'm like, man, the dude is never not working, huh? That's crazy. Because it's not even, like, even just currently. I don't know if there's something else going on. I know Big Sky is one, and that's coming back for a third season. I think this dropped, because this dropped last week, I believe, yes. And that's when the season finale of Big Sky, tangents and all this, just interesting. Once again, the timing of stuff is just fascinating in that regard, but the guy who was accusing her of stealing the necklace, and now it's like, and I even love the judge being like, talking to the prosecutor being like, did you not bother to check the value of it, and, like, you know, check the value of it? And she was like, no, we went by the insurance claims for it. And it's like, yeah, that means that guy might be in trouble because he might be overselling how much that jewel is. And I even love Mickey being like, hey, I'm not here trying to, the reason why we're having this conversation here, I don't want to embarrass this guy in front of his wife, her knowing that you kind of bought her something that was kind of a knockoff. So all the charges against Izzy was dismissed. It's like, yeah, you might have to come back to court because you might count as a witness against that guy who might be going down for fraud. But he ends up offering Izzy a job. So it's like, oh, that's pretty dope. She's going to be his driver from now on. Because I think having someone who knows her struggle, which she might be that person who can help pull him out, because I think eventually the story is going to be he's going to go off and get drugs. He's probably going to get Izzy to drive him somewhere to get drugs. Maybe she's going to try and talk him down, but whether that works or not, we'll see. I think having someone who's got a similar story to you, not the same, but who kind of go through the similar struggles, I think will help. But that's always the thing, like, right, he probably, work is just his substitute for, you know, because everyone has their vices, so you exchange one vice for another. So he probably already drowned himself in work, but then he got into drugs and tried to mitigate both, and it didn't work out. But now he's like on the upswing. But that's the thing. In a job like this where, like, oh, you win, you're going to feel good, you're going to feel on top of the world. The comparison I think of is like Nathan Ford from Leverage. The fact is that that was a big thing in like season 2 and 3. You know, anytime Sophie was like, yo, you're winning all the time, but you can't win forever. And when you come crash, because he tried not to drink anymore. So, and eventually try to find a middle ground there. Like, nothing ever fully worked. So I think we're going to have something like that with Mickey in this regard. But obviously his investigator, Cisco, who apparently is now dating Lorna. I was under the impression he was dating Maggie. That's what was confusing me. But so he's dating Lorna. Then it turns out they're actually engaged, which Mickey was like, oh, that's good. And Cisco's like, no. Like, I need to know if that's okay, because all you said was, is okay? Like, he's like, no. Like, do you love her? It's like, okay, then. Like, you have my support. But if you hurt her, he's like, I never do it. It's like, well, just know she is one of the 4 most important people to me. And he's like, who's the 4th? And Mickey's like, what? Cisco's like, who's the 4th person? Obviously, it's Haley, Maggie, and Lorna, but who's the 4th person? And then immediately what happens? He answers a phone call, Mickey Haller, and I was like, is that what's supposed to be? Is that a subtle joke of he's supposed to be the 4th most important person because he's a little selfish? That, like, no. And a little narcissistic that I'm the most important person? Or are we going to find out that the 4th most important person to him, we don't know what his relationship like with his family. Like, the fact is that didn't immediately come up must mean there must be some complications there. Either his parents aren't around, or weren't in his life, or he just not have bad. Who knows? I feel like that might be a story point waiting to happen. But that's why I was wondering. But another thought I was, maybe it's his client. Whoever his next client is, they're the most important person to him because he would devote everything. That's why he wants, a driver so he could start working on case, especially Trevor's because he has a week to prepare for trial. So that's definitely interesting. Obviously, there's the detective investigating Jerry's murder, and obviously he throws Mickey in there as a suspect because it's like, right, you just happen to get all of his clients, so it makes you a suspect. But he later on visits Mickey to be like, yo, I need your help. I need to look into those case files because the person who killed Jerry picked up the shells, so that shows you this is a professional. They didn't bother leaving the shell casings behind. It was an execution. It was a double tap. Well, I think a double tap means, well, because it was 2 shots, but I think a double tap is like you have to shoot in the same spot twice. Maybe not just shooting someone twice. Whatever the case. So I don't think it counted. It wasn't a double tap. But, like, yeah, the fact is they did that. And what they stole from him was, like, his laptop. So whatever was on that had to be something that got him killed, which obviously what information would be up there, something related to one of his clients. So Mickey now has to decide. He's initially pushing back, like, right, I can't give you access to, because it's the whole client attorney privilege, and it's like breaking that also stains his reputation, especially if he's trying to like make more of a, like, bring himself back into the forefront. So especially because he's looking at his daughter and he wants to be there in her life. That's why for him, he has the same nightmare over and over again about, it's not about necessarily drowning, like that's really bothers him. What bothers him the most about his nightmares is knowing that if he dies, he'd be leaving his daughter behind, and he doesn't want to do that. So he wants to, that's the main motivation of wanting to kind of be there in her life. So I think that's kind of interesting. I didn't talk about it earlier, but it does seem like him and Maggie have a look. I guess because we don't know when he was with who. It might, because I was wondering, like, could he have still been with Maggie in the time that he was going through his day? That might have been post him and Maggie, and him and Lorna might have already been divorced already. But what I'm thinking is that it's probably just a thing of, you are high and you are around our child and I don't want that. So she's very particular about, I know you're going to be here at this particular time, because I guess she's worried that if he's not on the dot, that it's like, right, you have to be able to keep your promises. So she kind of grills him for even just being 15 minutes late, because it's also, they've got a joint custody thing, but it seems like that could always end up getting reversed if he doesn't kind of follow through, showing that he's grown. So that's why she wants to give him an opportunity to be there, be a father again, and just kind of be there for his daughter, get on his feet first before he goes head first into a major murder trial like this. It was interesting to, when we learn a little bit more about Trevor, especially like his conversation with Mickey the first time. He's like, don't handle me. Don't try to say these things, you know, that are going to make me lean towards. It's like, no, you don't know what I'm going through. Being accused of killing the woman that I loved, because apparently she was having an affair. That's how she was killed, when she was sleeping with like her yoga instructor. Like, they both got shot after potentially doing the deed. Because they were pretty much both butt naked from what we saw. So being accused of that, it was interesting learning, you know, he's a tech person. And so he's like, right, he wasn't the most popular person in school. And he's like, that's when, you know, I had Zelda. And I was like, oh, that's funny that, because I'm not the Nintendo person. So my mind didn't immediately go to Zelda. I mean, obviously, like, I thought it was someone named Zelda, but I was like, oh, maybe it was someone named Zelda after, like, you know, Zelda from the Zelda games. But it's like, no, he was specifically talking about the games as being something he could latch onto. I was like, oh, interesting. And he ended up creating a game. And the moment he brought up Uncanny Valley, I was like, oh, wow. I'm sure that term gets used. And it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things of like video game stuff that you're just like, is it, I don't know if that's popular terminology. I mean, like, if you're into video games, the Uncanny Valley is a term you're going to hear a lot. So if you're into video games and stuff, you'll know that. So it's interesting. But I don't know, it just kind of caught me off guard. I was like, oh, it felt like such a... I mean, it's a very true term, so it felt weird to see it used, but maybe it's used a lot more in pop culture than I realized. I just feel like it's still such a niche term because of, like, I feel like video games still being as big as they are, still feel like they are, it's a lot more popular than it was, but I still feel like it is still a niche enough community, because, like, not everyone is into any video games. Even though millions of people play, it's still, like, that's, like, a fraction of, like, the billions of people that, you know, so that's always a thing for me. So that was interesting. But Laura, his wife, now deceased wife, was the inspiration for that. In fact, he built the character Nocturna based on his wife. And so for him, it's like this entire business that he has, because that was their first success, has always been the lifeblood of this company. They've been a team. So he's like, even people don't understand, like, even if I found them, like, even if I found out she was cheating on me, even if I found her like that, I wouldn't have, if she was still alive, I wouldn't have divorced her. I would have taken her back, because she's been such an important part of my life. Because he blames himself. He's like, if I was working all the time, it's because I was working all the time and she grew resentful, so I can't blame her. Which immediately in my brain, I'm like, he's lying about something. He's going to be omitting certain details just because Mickey was like, right, if we're going to make this thing work, you can't lie to me. your clients are never going to tell you the truth because they're afraid certain things are going to make them look guilty, which like you hiding things are going to make you look even more guilty. But it's like, right, Mickey's definitely going to get blindsided by some stuff. You can already get that inkling like this is going to be one of those cases where Trevor doesn't tell him everything that he should, and that's going to blow up, and he's going to get like surprised in court and blindsided by stuff in court, I'm sure. So, because even Mickey straight up, I can get you a not guilty, which I even love that, oh, like the different license plate, like the, the Lincoln that had no top, had, the bluish one, it was like NT guilty. It took me a minute or two and staring. I was like, what is NT? I was like, oh, I feel so stupid. Not guilty, of course. And then one of the other with license plate, the one that Izzy's driving him in this episode, the license plate says dismiss. I'm like, I'm very on the nose. I did like that when he talked to Trevor was like, oh, I've never heard of it. He's like, yeah, because celebrity lawyers are the worst because they draw even more attention to my clients. It's like, no, I do my job by being kind of below the radar without gaining too much. Like, yes, he has a bit of a reputation I think the law department of like judges and probably other lawyers know him as a Lincoln lawyer, but he's probably not like a celebrity lawyer in that regard. This case will probably end up putting him on the map again after kind of a year dry spell, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing of like, right, celebrity lawyers are an issue because it draws too much attention. Trevor's case is already going to be a spectacle. Him being a lawyer on top, and that was also an issue for Trevor that he wanted to come into this as strong as possible because having a lawyer with a kind of complicated history like Mickey's would kind of tarnish any like stepping with your best foot forward type of thing. But yeah, he does take Mickey on as a client, which yes, Mickey's happy. Yes, like he feels like right, life is kind of moving in the right direction for the first time in a while. So he's ready to and he's happy about it because Izzy's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, because she's like, you look like you're about to cry. And he's like, yeah, I'm good. Because at first I was wondering whether Trevor's story got to him, but he was so excited because he feels like, right, the rush of, yeah, I'm good. That was also a thing for Lorna. It's like, right, Mickey, he's always ready for a fight, especially, if he's got one arm tied behind his back. So once again, Lorna is in the belief that all of this will help him and get back on his feet in the long run, kind of be back to himself. Even saying that that's why she wanted him, to get back into the Lincoln, because it's like, yeah, once you're in the Lincoln, you are yourself. You turn it on and you're good again. So, but at the end of the episode, it does seem like they're being followed. By who? What the circumstances are, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But yeah, like I said, for the first introduction to this story, I'm very excited to continue it, to see not only how this Trevor case plays out, but also how everything plays out with potentially the other cases. Like I said, I'm sure he's going to balance other cases throughout this season. I doubt Trevor's going to be the only case he works, but if it ends up being that case, I'll be surprised. But it's going to be interesting what other cases he might be dealing with. But yeah, I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.